Good evening. My name is Susan Nicastro, and I serve as the City Councilor representing Ward 4 on the south side of Brockton. This evening, Ward 5 Councilor Jeff Thompson and I are hosting a virtual neighborhood meeting to discuss a proposed housing development to be located at 223-261 Thatcher Street. This evening, we will have brief opening remarks by Councilor Thompson and me, followed by a presentation by the CEO of Planning Office for Urban Affairs in Boston, Mr. Bill Grogan, and his team. After that, we will have public comment and a close. Okay. This housing project was sponsored by my predecessor, Ward 4 Councilor, and it was approved by the City Council in 2016. My job has been to weigh in to best protect our constituents. And for months, I've been working hard at this, as has Councilor Thompson and State Representative Michelle Dubois. And I should tell you that Representative Dubois is present this evening, and I will invite her to speak before we take all the other public comments. So at this time, I would like to introduce to you my colleague, Councilor Jeff Thompson, who represents Ward 5. Jeff?
Yes. Thank you, Councilman Castro. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this evening's community meeting. I'd like to thank Councilman Castro for co-hosting this meeting. And I'd also like to thank Bill Grogan and his development team for their presentation tonight. Now, although I am new to this project, I have been working closely with Councilman Castro, Representative Dubois, and Bill Grogan and his team to ensure that this development is responsive to our city's feedback and our concerns. And thankfully, they have been. In fact, the presentation you are to see tonight is not their originally proposed plan. Mr. Grogan and his team have listened to our feedback and have re-engineered their plan to reduce the paved surfaces by 20%, with a corresponding increase of 20% of green space. They have also readjusted the positions of their buildings to provide a more open environment with better sight lines from Thatcher Street. The developers have agreed to a community meeting space on site, along with a potential playground and a covered bat bus stop, all being available for the surrounding neighbors. Now, I know there is opposition to this project, but a previous city council saw fit to approve it. It is now my duty to make sure that this development enhances this neighborhood and to do so to the best of my ability. I look forward to tonight's presentation and to all of your comments, your questions, and your concerns. And with that, I will turn it over to Bill Grogan and his team. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councilor Nicastro and Councilor Thompson. I really want to thank you for hosting this neighborhood meeting. I think while we obviously wish we could make this presentation in person, we're grateful for both of you convening this forum, and we appreciate everyone taking the time out of their evening to be with us tonight. As Councilor Nicastro noted, I'm Bill Grogan. I'm the president of the Planning Office for Urban Affairs, and I'm here tonight with our experienced development team to share with you the plans for Thatcher Street housing development that, as Councilor Thompson noted, has been going through some revisions to respond to city comments and city peer review comments over the last several months. I'd like to briefly introduce our team members, provide a little background on the planning office and our approach, and then have our team members describe the development in a little bit more detail. Tonight we have with us my colleague Dan Rabinovitz from the planning office, Brian Kuchar, our civil engineer from Horsley Witten, Jay Szymanski, our architect from the architectural team, Jeff Dirk, our traffic engineer from Vanass, and Brian Dempsey on our team, and Jim Burke, who will be joining us shortly. The Planning Office for Urban Affairs is the applicant and developer of Thatcher Street Housing Development, and we are a nonprofit housing developer and social justice ministry associated with the Archdiocese of Boston. And our focus is on creating high quality housing where people can live with dignity and respect. And over the 50 plus years that we've been in existence, we've developed nearly 3,000 units of housing across the Commonwealth, and all of our developments, we work to create housing that will be integrated into and a part of the larger community and become long-term assets within the community. We view ourselves as invested within the community and really having a long-term commitment. I think the current public health crisis certainly underscores the importance of providing safe, high-quality housing for all. And this proposed housing will be an important effort to make sure that everyone has access to a place that they can call home. And at Thatcher Street Housing Development, our focus has been on developing workforce housing that can be available to a broad range of households who currently reside and work in Brockton. As Councilor Nicastro noted, Thatcher Street Housing Development is located on Thatcher Street on the property that is currently owned by the Poor Sisters of Jesus Crucified and the Sorrowful Mother. And the property is located within a 40-yard district that was passed and approved by the City Council. We understand that some of the benefits from that, the city has already received about $200,000 for the passage of the 40-yard district, and the use of a portion of those funds is being coordinated for offsite improvements within the ward and the surrounding neighborhood. And the 40-yard district really provides a framework for the redevelopment of this property and outlines the parameters and requirements that we're working in. And through the end of 2019 and the beginning of this year, our development team worked to develop a site plan design that would comply with the requirements of the 40-yard district. But at the same time, as Councilor Thompson noted, we've been committed to developing a design that respects the existing site, looks at and tries to reduce the overall impacts on the site, and meets the goals of sustainability, improved public infrastructure, protection of natural features, and does so in a compact manner. Just as a little bit of history, we submitted the initial site plan design to the planning board in May of this year, and over the last 5 months, we've performed additional investigative site work. We've refined and approved the site design, as Councilor Thompson noted, and addressed various comments that we've received, including those from the city and their peer reviewer. So I'd like to briefly provide a brief overview of the development and then turn it over to our civil engineer to walk through the design in more detail. Thatcher Street Housing Development is a 175 unit multifamily residential development that complies with the requirements of the Thatcher Street Overlay District and will create a healthy, vibrant, and diverse community. And in the period of time that we're in right now, stable, high quality housing is critically important. And we believe that the redevelopment will provide this housing in a attractive, convenient setting. I'd like to pull up on my screen to start to share some of the images so that we can walk everyone through the development. So I note that screen sharing has been disabled for me. So if that's possible to enable that, I can share some of the images.
Mike? Mike?
Yes.
Will you enable screen sharing for Mr. Grogan?
Yeah, it's all set.
Okay, when I try to share my screen, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
All participants, there we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, great. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Okay. Great. As I was describing, Thatcher Street housing development will provide diversity of unit types across the site. We've spread the development across 5 buildings in a campus-like setting around the existing Lady of Sorrows Convent building, which is located as Building A on the site plan. And that building will be renovated and serve as a development identity and centerpiece, and have a significant community space that's available for both residents as well as the community at large. Development will also include 185 parking spaces, significant landscaped open spaces that we can walk through for residents of development, as well as accommodations for an internal bus stop. And I think I just want to highlight some of the efforts that Councillor Thompson noted that we've been focused on as we've been making revisions over the last several months to the plan. And that was trying to maximize the amount of open space and green space to really create a streetscape feel along proposed roadways within the building, minimizing as much as possible the overall impervious area, and keeping all proposed structures, infrastructure, and grading outside of the 100-foot wetlands buffer. And in addition, we've incorporated an extension, which we'll highlight, of the Brockton area transit route in order to improve the connection to public transportation and accommodating an internal bus stop. And we've had conversations with Brockton area transport, and they've indicated their support for adding this loop to the service. So with that brief overview, I'd like to turn it over to Brian Kuchar, our civil engineer, to discuss the site design in a little bit more detail.
Thanks, Bill. As Councilor Thompson mentioned, our design team has worked closely with the city to improve the overall site design to reduce the amount of paved surfaces and minimize the overall impacts. Some of these changes include the use of on-street parking and smaller parking lots for a more compact development. This led to a decrease in the overall amount of impervious pavement by 20%, an increase in the overall amount of programmed open space for the residents of the development. And those can be shown, I don't know if you can point to them, Bill, but they can be shown up along Thatcher Street here in the upper corner, correct? Just off of the convent building, and there is a large area just south of the existing utility easement, the 50-foot utility easement that runs through the property. We'll also increase the overall green space, not just the programmed open space, but how much of the lot is maintained as green space. We've also used green stormwater management techniques to maximize both stormwater treatment and infiltration on the site. And as Bill mentioned, the removal of all proposed structures, infrastructure, grading from the existing 100-foot wetland buffer. I'd also like to mention that the plans have been adjusted to incorporate comments received from the city and the city's consultant. The buildings, there's 5 of them. We're going to convert the existing convent building and provide 4 new residential buildings. You can see them highlighted in the brown color on the site. The lighter brown would be the existing convent building. There are 3 access points to enter and exit the site located along Thatcher Street, as shown on the plan with the large black arrows. This provides egress into and out of the site, and also allows for emergency access circulation, as well as the BAT bus route with the bus stop, which is located with the red star seen just off of building 2. There are 3 interior roads, as you can see here shown, to provide the vehicular circulation throughout the development. Parking is located on the street to encourage traffic calming, to reduce vehicular speeds, and making it more friendly to pedestrians by creating a streetscape along the interior roadways with sidewalks and lighting. As Bill mentioned, a total of 185 spaces are provided in 3 smaller parking lots, and as I just mentioned, the on-street parking with 112 on-street spaces. So a majority of the parking is on-street. Sidewalks are also provided along the 3 access drives as well is maintaining the existing sidewalk along Thatcher Street from the St. Joseph's Healthcare Facility all the way down to the new proposed entrance and exit in the northeast corner as Bill has shown here. Some public improvements include the internal bus stop, which we just mentioned, highlighted in red, the extension of the sidewalk along Thatcher Street between the second and third access points, and the maintaining of the existing crosswalk across Thatcher Street. Stormwater management is provided through a series of above and below ground stormwater infiltration and green stormwater management techniques and integrated into the overall site and landscape design. The design includes natural practices such as vegetated infiltration basins, which can be seen here on the plan in the three large green or olivey green shapes. It also includes bioretention areas spread throughout the site that would intercept stormwater runoff to provide pre-treatment, swales as well to convey stormwater and to move water through the site, and underground chambers, as mentioned earlier, to help manage the overall stormwater runoff and infiltrate. The landscaping design, as shown here, emphasizes the use of native plantings and strives to integrate the proposed development into the local surroundings. Our intent is to create a passive landscape that complements the proposed building architecture, incorporates good environmental practices, and provides open space for the development's residents. We also provide both mowed lawns and meadows as shown in the light green, which is along the southern boundary and the interior of the site. And then also more of a meadow look, which would be along up near the infiltration basin along Thatcher Street, and then also between the St. Joseph's property and our development where a lot of the stormwater treatment and management is occurring. Street trees are also provided at a maximum spacing of 35 feet on center throughout the development, and the existing screening along Thatcher Street is left in place and where necessary supplemented to help screen parking. I think now I will turn it over to Jay Zemansky, and he'll discuss the building design and layout.
What's your moment? Sure, this is correct.
Jay, I think you're muted. We can't hear you.
Huh?
Still can't hear you, Jay.
There we go. No.
All right. Well, maybe while we try to get Jay's technical situation corrected, can turn it over just briefly to Jeff Dirk, just to provide an over of the traffic analysis that we've conducted, and then we can come back and describe the building details in a little bit more detail.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Is it possible to go back to the site plan? Just
Of course.
one slide.
Yeah.
That's fine. Thank you very much. So my name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm a partner with Vanessa & Associates, and we are the transportation consultants for the project. We did conduct a full transportation assessment for the development. And I think given the situation that we have going on now, it's important to mention that all of our data collection was done pre-COVID. So it was done towards the end of last year. So it reflects conditions, hopefully, that at some point we'll get back to in terms of traffic volumes on the roadways. Hopefully not as high a level of traffic volumes, but something more normal, normalization. So I think as you heard from the city councilors, I think the traffic analysis or the transportation analysis underwent a similar type of evolution with consultation with the city. And I think it was a very good back and forth, and the city retained a peer review consultant as well to look at the findings of the transportation assessment, and I think modify some of the improvements that we had originally recommended. The project itself, in terms of how we've evaluated the traffic impacts, we're predicting it would generate somewhere between 60 and 70 peak hour trips. So that's over the course of an hour on a weekday. But I do want to say that that did not take into effect or into account the fact that we do have access to public transportation, because at the time the study was put together, the idea of the BAT bus stop was something that the city and the city councilors were working with us on to try to get that located in the project site. You know, given that this is a 40R project, it's important that we have that public transportation access. So in reality, the project is really going to produce somewhere closer to about 40 peak hour trips. So it's not going to be a significant impact or increase in traffic along Thatcher Street. And I think, as you heard Brian mention, not only do we have the opportunity of having that BAT bus stop located within the site, Thatcher Street itself has existing sidewalks, so it's a very walkable street. And the fact that we're extending the sidewalk down to the project site also serves to allow us to have opportunities to reduce traffic. Thatcher Street as well, it's approximately 30 feet in width, which is sufficient for bicycle travel. The speed of traffic along that roadway, as we've measured it over a 2-day period, again, towards the end of last year, was somewhere in the order of about 36 to 37 miles an hour in terms of the majority of traffic was traveling at or below those speeds. So it's generally conducive to bicycle travel. So again, that's just another amenity that we're able to make sure that the project site embraces in that. And as Brian had mentioned, we're fully connected to each of those amenities: the BAT bus stop in the site, sidewalks within the project that extend to Thatcher Street, and then being able to link up to those on-road bicycle accommodations that exist in the area. We did perform a full traffic analysis. So looking at, you know, the entire Thatcher Street corridor and what this project would mean in terms of potential increases in motorist delays and vehicle queuing over the conditions that exist out there today. And what was found as a part of our assessment and independently verified by the city's peer review consultant is that this project, producing somewhere between, as I mentioned, 60 to 70 peak hour trips, would not result in an increase in motorist delays or vehicle queuing that would be readily apparent to anyone who's on the roadway. So what that means is the delays would increase by less than 2 seconds. And again, that was independently verified by the city's peer review consultant. And then if you're sitting at an intersection and there's a backup or queuing in front of you, the project's predicted to increase that backup by no more than 1 vehicle. So again, it's a relatively minor impact on Thatcher Street. And those numbers did not take into account the fact that we have the BAT bus stop within the project site, which was something worked on very hard by the city councilors and incorporated into our project. And that's a significant benefit in terms of reducing the traffic impacts of the development. So I'll turn it back over to you or others of the project team.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that summary and overview. We'll see if, Jay, I don't know if your audio has been able to be corrected.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
Great. I was hoping I wouldn't have to play architect, so I'm glad that you can you can speak to this. Thank you.
I'm sure you would have done great, Bill. So let's stay in the site plan initially. So as been mentioned, there's 5 buildings on the site, 4 new buildings and 1 existing building. So the existing building is the convent and chapel, which is labeled as A on this drawing. And it's really meant to be the centerpiece of the development. So building A will include 39 units when it's renovated, and the chapel will be renovated into community space. So there'll be approximately 10,000 square feet of space that can be used by residents, but also by the general public for events to be held in that space. There are 2 buildings labeled B1 and B2. Those are townhome style buildings, and they include 15 units each. It's a mix of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units in those buildings. And when I say townhome buildings, I mean each unit has its own direct entrance in those buildings. So there'll be units on the ground floor that are single level units. And then above that, on floors 2 and 3, there'll be duplex units. So those are both 3-story buildings. And then there are 2 elevator buildings labeled C1 and C2. And by that, I mean all of the units in those buildings are single story and they're served by internal elevators. So you'll enter a common lobby and travel to an elevator to serve the upper floors or through common corridors on the ground floors. So building C1, which is closest to Thatcher Street, includes 28 units, and building C2 has 78 units. And those are both 3 stories. Next slide. So I want to walk through a series of images, first from the outside of the development looking in, and then we have some images from internal to the development looking at the individual buildings. So in the lower right corner of this slide, you'll see a locus plan, which is just a small version of the site plan, and there's a red arrow shown there. And that red arrow will show where this view is taken from. So what you see in this view in the foreground is Thatcher Street going across, and this is taken approximately from the entrance to the college. So on the right side behind those trees, you'll see the existing convent building. And then sort of center in this image is one of those townhome buildings, the B2 building. And in the foreground, you'll see how the building is really set back to provide that open space that we've talked about and really lessen the impact on the surrounding of the development to keep it more compact and sort of increase the amount of open space around it. Next slide.
Oops.
So we're moving kind of a northern direction down Thatcher. So again, in this slide on the right, you'll see the convent building, and then moving across to building C2 in the background in the blue color, and then the 2 B buildings, B1 and B2. And again, you can see how they're pushed back with landscape in front of it, screening in front of it, and generally open space between Thatcher Road and the new construction. Next slide. So again, this is the convent building in the foreground. It's really, we want to be the centerpiece. We want that to be the focal point of the development, and the other buildings complement that. In terms of the architecture of the buildings, they take cues from the existing buildings around it. So if you look at the convent building, you'll see it has a sloped roof. You'll see the kind of angled gable forms above the entrance. And sort of look at the new proposed buildings on the left side, and you'll see similar forms, similar sloped roofs, angled gable forms, and projected bays. So we're taking cues from the buildings that are closest to it. And as we go through the other buildings, we'll see how that's done in some different ways as we go forward. Next slide. So this view is taken between the chapel building, which is on the left in this image, and building C1, which is on the right of this image. And what's interesting to note is that there's a parking lot directly in front of you. And through the process, we actually added some screening, some landscape buffer, so that that parking lot is much less evident from the outside looking in. Next slide. So this is a little bit further down on Thatcher, looking back towards the chapel building and the convent building beyond that. And you can just see C1 on the right side of this image. And again, the idea here is that we wanted to highlight the existing buildings, not crowd them. So our buildings are intentionally kept away from the existing buildings so that the site keeps its identity, and we're not trying to compete with those existing buildings. Next image. So this is a view of building C1, and this is in contrast to the other sloped roof buildings that I mentioned before. So this building is closest to the chapel building, which has a very low slope roof on it. And it's also very close to the St. Joseph's property next door, which also has a low slope or a flat roof. So this building takes on a little bit different look than the others. We also introduced some brick. You'll see the sort of reddish color vertical columns. Those are masonry on this building. So again, we're taking cues from the chapel building and bringing some of those materials into the building. What's interesting also to note here is that on the ground floor, you can see that even in the elevator buildings, for ground floor units where we want to have direct entrances. So even in an elevator building, you can get into those ground floor units directly from the exterior. So we add a sense of ownership for the residents in those units, but it also lends to a little bit safer pedestrian environment because you add eyes on the street. You add more activity on that sidewalk, more people looking at the activity that's happening on the street, and it tends to make a safer environment. And it also tends to slow traffic down. As Brian mentioned, the parallel parking along these main streets, really coupled with the raised entry stoops, tends to slow things down and make it a safer pedestrian experience. Next slide. So now we've moved inside the development. So this view, again, looking at that little plan in the lower left now, you see that the red arrow. In this image on the right side of the convent building, and then moving to the left is the C2 building, and then the far left is B1, one of the townhome buildings. Next slide. So this is looking at the main entrance, the common entrance to the C2 building on the left, and then one of the townhome buildings on the right side. Next slide. So this is now looking back in the other direction with the convent on the left side and building C2 on the right. And you can see those direct entrances here. So along the back of the sidewalk, you'll have individual entrances into residence units. So again, it adds activity on the street, slows things down, make it a safer environment. In this view, you can also see the street trees that really sort of soften the edge of the building where it meets the sidewalk. Next slide. This is the last image that we have, and this one is taken between the two townhome buildings looking back towards the convent. So you can see the convent building in the background, and then the two townhome buildings, again, with their individual entrances on the street on either side. Next slide. Yeah, so that's the sort of end of the architectural presentation. And I guess you guys, when I was stepped out, you went through traffic already. So I think we'll hand that back to Bill.
Great. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate that. And I think a couple of things I just want to highlight that were touched on. One was on the community room space. As Jay mentioned, the existing convent will be converted to have significant community room space that will be available for the general public, neighborhood and community meetings. And it's really part of our effort to really integrate the development into the larger neighborhood. And I think the other aspect I just want to highlight is that on the southern portion of the site, there will be community gardens on the property, and that's something that we have enhanced and added to make sure that feature is kept and is a significant part of the development. I think I just wanted to briefly run through a couple of other elements of the project, just to both describe workforce housing as well as a local preference that's a part of our development. I think we're committed to providing significant workforce housing opportunities for local residents, and to the maximum extent possible, we will be providing a local preference for up to 70% of the housing units in the development. The categories for local preference include current residents of Brockton, municipal employees, employees of local businesses, including Massasoit Community College, as well as households with children in the city schools. And I think this really, again, is an effort to make this a resource and a real amenity for residents of the city. I think one of the other unique features that we want to highlight is the ownership structure. One of the really unique aspects is that we will have a board of managers within the ownership entity that will own the housing development. And this board of managers will include a representative from the Sisters of Jesus Crucified, as well as a representative who's appointed by the executive director of the Brockton Housing Authority. And the establishment of this board will provide a mechanism to supervise and oversee the development, to ensure that it is a contributing part of the community and really looks out for the interests of the community. I think it's something that's unique and is not commonly found on these types of development. But again, it's recognizing the importance of community and the importance of this area, this asset within the neighborhood. And then finally, I just want to briefly outline sort of our next steps and sort of where we are. I think as we've mentioned, we've revised our plans to respond to and address various city comments from both city engineers, department heads, as well as the city's peer reviewer. We expect to be submitting revised plans to the city within the next week. As we also described, all of the improvements are outside of the 100-foot buffer for the wetlands, and we'll be submitting a request for a determination of applicability with the Conservation Commission at the end of the month to confirm the wetlands delineation. And that's sort of where we are in the process right now. So I think, Councilor Nicastro, that concludes our formal presentation this evening. I think our consultants and team is available until I think we said about 7:45 or so, and happy to respond to any comments or questions. And until then, again, just want to reiterate our thanks for taking the time and effort to coordinate this this meeting.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. I just had, before I turn on the public, I just wanted to mention that I've had several calls from residents of Oakland Street who are concerned about traffic mitigation and the speed controls, independent of this Thatcher Street housing being developed and housing people. The street has terrible problems with people driving too fast and with the volume of traffic. And so I told them that I would take them in front of the Traffic Commission to see if there's anything that they can do to help this, independent of the Thatcher Street development. But I wanted you to know that they are concerned and want it to be heard this evening. Also, a resident of East Street left me a message, but unfortunately didn't leave a phone number that I could return this call. He's concerned about the use of a private way that runs parallel to Oakland, which is called Kame Street, as a cut through between Thatcher and East Street, and its usage increasing with the development of this Thatcher Street property. I told him, or I want you to know about everybody. Councilor Dubois has just sent me a message. She would like to speak, but she's on another call right now, and so won't speak just yet. And finally, I wanted to mention that former Ward 5 Councilor Ellen Beauregard spent a lot of time in the early stages on this project and really contributed some good ideas about it. And so I want to give her some credit and some thanks. So at this time, I think we will start public comment. Let's see. I will unmute everyone, and I'd like people to go actually one after another and speak. You see, I have no hands up to tell me people want to speak, but I'll unmute everyone and see who wants to speak.
Hello?
Whoever would like to speak, let's see. Let me see. Deb Garland, you're here. Would you like to speak?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
As I live on Sprague Ave, which is at the bottom of Thatcher Street. It took me 5 minutes the other day during a pandemic to get out onto the main road from my home going down Pine Street. Thatcher goes to Pine Street. It's a bottleneck. This has been my concern throughout this whole process. Adding 297 cars, which I'm giving you because that's all you're allowed to park at your property, to that limit is not gonna make for a good disbursement of traffic. That's our biggest concern. The sidewalks do not go all the way up to on each side. Some homes are actually on the sidewalk at the bottom of Thatcher. It's a big concern, and it always has been. Although you threw some pretty drawings at us, site plans, as you call them, I don't feel that this is the right amount of housing for this area. I understand you have to do this to make your quota, to make money or benefit yourselves or the developer, but it's not helping our neighborhood any with the traffic. Do you have anything to say about that?
Sure. And this is Bill Grogan, and then I can see if Jeff has anything he would like to add. With respect to the number of cars, on the development, there are 185 parking spaces that we've provided for. So that's the number of vehicles. We have looked to have multiple access points as were described, both ingress and egress, in order to disperse traffic as much as possible. I'll let see if Jeff he has anything to add specifically to the to your other comments. And I think with respect to we don't have a specific. We're looking to develop what we think is within the parameters of what was approved for the 40R district when this was passed. I think the city and the city council set the dimensions and set the parameters, and this is working within that. We're a nonprofit housing developer, so we're looking to become to be a long-term neighbor and have a long-term commitment to the area. So that's our focus. That's why we've included significant community room space within the development. As I mentioned, we've looked to increase as much as possible open space within the area, and that's why we've made these revisions and refinements that we think do bring do make the development an asset. In addition, we are adding sidewalks along Thatcher Street in front of our development as well, and the addition of the bat route are enhancements to, I think, public improvements too. So Jeff, I don't know if there's anything further that you would add on the specific traffic question.
Yeah, I think you summarized it pretty well, Bill. But I think what I would mention is that the parking doesn't generate traffic. So I understand it's a good way to kind of come up with a rough number. But I think really to focus on residential development such as this, their traffic is spread out over the course of the day. So even if you took the number of parking spaces, one of the things to understand, and you probably realize this, is not all those vehicles leave at the same time. It's spread out over the course of the day.
I do understand.
Excuse me. So the peak hour numbers, and that's really what, that's when you're seeing your delays. We're talking somewhere with, incorporating the public transportation access. It's 40 or 50 trips over the course of an hour, and not all of it. Some of it, we have 3 access points. Some of it's going to go east. Some of it's going to go west along Thatcher Street. So as you get away from the site, the numbers really get very small. They reduce themselves as you get away from the site. And that's not to take away from the conditions that you experience out there today, but it's only just to put it in context of the project itself in terms of how it's going to impact those conditions. It's very dispersed over the course of an hour. So it's not a huge increase, and it's certainly not going to be something where you're going to see, everyone leaving the site at the same time. It's very dispersed over the course of the day.
So you're guaranteeing this, are you? So what's going to happen if we, as residents, find that there's all these delays and we can't get out of our houses to go our neighborhood, which are all single family homes, by the way, to get to work, which we do on a daily basis. We already have up there, we have all the trash transfers and recycling and cars. And I think This neighborhood has been dealt a big blow with all, if you go up Thatcher Street, we have persevered through all kinds of junk is up there. And honestly, I don't agree with putting people up there next to a methane, a landfill that spews methane gas. I'm sorry, I don't think it's safe for children. That's all.
Thank you. All right, well, I just lost my screen. Oh, that's stressful. Hostess with the mostest, maybe not. At this time, I'm going to ask Councilor at Large Winthrop Farwell to speak.
Thank you, Councilor Nicastro and Councilor Thompson. I just have three informational questions. When this
Thanks.
was discussed, it was mentioned that we might have construction in stages. Has that changed, or will we be doing the entire project from start to finish, beginning on a date certain? Or is the plan still to do a couple of buildings and then a couple of more buildings? That was the first question. The other two are probably easier to answer. Snow removal, if we get 18 inches to 2 feet of snow on that diagram of the property, where would you be storing the snow that you're going to be removing from sidewalks and streets on your property? And then lastly, parking. If I heard correctly, there are 185 parking spaces. Is that sufficient if people are going to have visitors? I would think with 175 units, you're only having 10 additional parking spaces. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that. So just those three things, and I thank you all for this meeting this evening.
Sure. Thank you, Councilor. And I'll start off with the first question for construction in stages. I think it's likely that it will be constructed in probably two phases for the development. The process that we go, once we obtain our permits, then we would look to start to secure financing. And I think again, it's likely that the financing will come in in at least two phases, and so the expectation is that will be a phased in development over time, but that will reveal itself a little bit more as we go through the financing process. But that's our expectation. With respect to the snow removal question, I will see if I can call up. It looks like I lost my ability to share my screen. There were designated areas on the site plan to provide for snow removal at various locations. I want to say there were at least 4 or 5 different locations throughout the site in which to have snow storage, which we reviewed with our property, with the property manager, and felt that was sufficient. So there are multiple areas in which that can be accommodated. And let me just pull that back up here. And I can, and Brian Kucha may be able to highlight those a little bit easier than I can. And then we can come back to that. But then with respect to parking, yes, there are 185 parking spaces. Typically at our development, what we find is that parking is less than turns out to be less than 1-to-1 more in the area of around 0.7 or so parking spaces per resident in that area. I think the fact that we have worked hard to integrate Brockton area transit and a bus stop, the expectation is that will be less than that, and that will allow for visitor parking as well to accommodate that. So that's why we've worked hard to make sure that we can include that as a amenity for both the larger neighborhood as well as reducing traffic impacts within the development itself.
If it is workforce housing, it could be that people will live in some of these units and there'll be 2 people who have to work because they need the income to sustain their living arrangements and their monthly bills. So I will tell you, I'm a little bit concerned with only 185 parking places, but I'm not an expert on what your historical experience is with respect to the number of vehicles on a site. let me just say, I hope you're right. I hope you're right, because if there is an overflow, let's just hypothetically say there is an overflow, where would the vehicles go?
And I think part of that is part of the selection process as well for units. Residents will not have the ability to bring more than one vehicle on site, and that will again help determine sort of who's going to be residing in the development itself. And I think our experience, especially recently, where there has been this type of integration with public transportation, is that it has been in the 0.7 to 0.75 parking spaces per unit is what we've realized, what we've seen at our other developments.
Again, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Okay.
And then just again, I think there are multiple, just back to the snow storage, there are multiple areas up in various corners of the site where we have designated snow storage to accommodate that.
So that's correct, Bill. It's typically at the end of the parking lots, in the corners. And then we also have a large amount of open space along the southern boundary as well that we're taking advantage for snow storage as well.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Okay, I have questions in the chat room about financing, and you mentioned earlier, Bill, that you don't have financing yet. Can you just give people a sense of the timing on
Sure.
obtaining financing?
Sure, I'm happy to, Councilor Nicastro. As is typical with these types of developments, the first step is going through the permitting process and securing the permits and approvals, and then seeking to obtain the financing. So this is the first step that we're on in this process, and it's typical with all of our developments. Once we secure our permits and approvals, then we're able to go and seek and secure our financing, which typically could be a 12 to 18-month process, given the resources that are out there and the competitive nature of securing resources. But again, this is typically obtain permits and approvals and then go and seek the financing, because you can't obtain the financing without having the approvals in hand.
Thank you. And someone else in the financing is asking about the number of 3-bedroom units.
Sure. And I believe, Jay, I don't know if you know offhand, and if not, I have that information.
Yeah, Bill, there are 13 3-bedroom units.
A total of 13 3-bedroom.
Yep.
Okay, 13 in a total of 175 units.
That is correct.
Okay, that's good. All right. There we go. At this time, members of the public, I'm thrilled that you're all here. If you would raise your hand in Zoom to let me know that you'd like to speak. And at this time, I'm going to invite Elaine Donovan to speak.
Hi, Susan. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So first of all, I just want to say that I second the feedback of Deb Garland. She raised many of the concerns I've already have. That I have felt it was unfair from the beginning to rezone our single-family neighborhood, and I don't agree with this being the right spot for high-density housing. But I'm not going to belabor that at this time. I just wanted to make the statement of where I stand on that. So I have some specific questions regarding the traffic. One of my concerns, this is essentially, or began as, it's really a Ward 4 project, and I understand that the property itself is in Ward 4, but the division between Wards 4 and 5 is right down the middle of Thatcher Street, and actually that ends, I'm not sure exactly where on Thatcher, but the lower half of Thatcher where it hits Pine and Summer is Ward 5, Massasoit is Ward 5. One of my concerns is with the only entrances to this development being on Thatcher Street, unless you take a right and go to East Bridgewater, which seems unlikely, all the impact of all the traffic and the noise and the exhaust is really going to be on Ward 5 and the Ward 5 residents. And again, I know it was the previous city council, but it was approved against the wishes of the Ward 5 councilor at the time. And so I have concerns about the brunt of the impact on this is really on the Ward 5 residents. So I was wondering if there's been any consideration for putting alternative entrance off of maybe East Street, or I don't know, Kami, that street, or somewhere else to reduce the impact on strictly Thatcher. Before you answer that, I also had a question regarding the traffic study. I know the conversation thus far has focused on Thatcher Street. I question whether traffic through Massasoit Boulevard was included. And I know we've talked about it, there's not going to be that much more traffic. Well, the speed limit in Massasoit is 15 miles an hour, strictly enforced. And it doesn't take a lot of cars going 15 miles an hour to cause a traffic jam real fast. I mean, I've seen it. There's times of the day, especially when classes are coming and going, that it's taken me more than a half hour to get from one side of Massasoit to the other. So that was my other feedback. And last question is a finance question, again, regarding the Ward 5 issue. I heard earlier in the call that $200,000 has already been paid to the city for this development, and there may be more payments down the line. And I would like to know if any of that money is being slated for improvements for Ward 5, not strictly Ward 4. Thank you.
I can answer that question. At my request, we arranged, cooperating with the planning office and Mayor Sullivan and the city council, we arranged for $100,000 of that $200,000. That's the amount of money we got from the city as a result. It's for the 40R projects. We held back $100,000. We're holding it in a separate fund for mitigation of impacts. And that will benefit Ward 4 as well as Ward 5. We haven't identified yet what we're going to spend it on, but that's where it will go. Thank you.
Okay. What about the creating additional entrances not on in and out of Thatcher Street and the Massasoit traffic? Does anyone have feedback on that?
Well, I think we've looked to create, three distinct separate access points within the property that we would own and control. So those range from the center of the site and then the two ends in order to try to disperse impacts. We have control over the property that that we would be purchasing and developing, and really feel that that's the best way within our control that we can try to minimize those impacts, as well as by having the BAT route incorporated into the site as well to again try to minimize traffic impacts as much as possible.
Okay, thank you for the response. Although I must say, my concern is the impact of the traffic on Thatcher Street. So having extra entrances on the same street, only separated by a couple hundred yards, I'm afraid does not address that concern. If you still got one street where that all the traffic, or two, Thatcher and Massasoit Boulevard, Ward 5 portions, which are going to bear the brunt of every car coming and going. Like I said, unless you take a right and go down to East Bridgewater, it's going to literally not be possible to traverse Ward 5 to access this property.
I think from an access point, this is the best way to try to disperse the impacts as much as possible along, from the site into Thatcher Street. I think that this is actually, again, more than just having one or two access points. Again, trying to disperse it as much as possible at various points on Thatcher Street, and obviously the site only fronts on Thatcher Street, so they're limited in terms of where those access points can be on Thatcher Street.
because Thatcher Street only comes out in one place onto Pine Street, which is a one-way. And then the lower half of Pine and onto Summer, that's gonna be a real clog. And you going through Massasoit at 15 miles an hour, forget about it. I'm just saying. I don't know if our city officials may have any other feedback about that. Was Massasoit Boulevard included in the study?
It was. And thank you for the question about that, because that was a specific area that the city had asked us to include in the transportation assessment. So all of the data collection and traffic counts and speed measurements and everything that we had done were while Massasoit was in session. So we did capture the traffic volumes, the turning movements, and everything that are associated with Massasoit, and that is reflected in our traffic analysis.
Okay. Thank you.
Patty Lane? Thank you for your comments. Okay, at this time, I'll recognize Chris Koska. Chris, would you give us your address, please?
Sure, I live at 50 Center Street, downtown. My only concern is with the current configuration of the streets, I don't see an access point to Hammond Street that actually has a cemetery in the back of the property. I'm wondering if the city would be taking that over or what the process would be to have access to that.
In 2016, or it might have been in 2017, the city actually discontinued Hammond Street, the stretch of it that runs from Thatcher Street to East Street. That's something I found out today.
Okay, but how would one get access to that cemetery then if, well, at least from the configuration I'm looking at, there is no direct access anymore?
Well, eventually the cemetery is going to have direct access from Thatcher Street.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I will recognize Councilor Jeffrey Thompson. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Councilor Nicastro, Bill, your team, and again, everyone for joining us. Bill, I was hoping that you could give a further breakdown as to the 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. You already said 13 3 bedrooms. After that breakdown, I was hoping if you could, I know there is some sort of calculation as to how many school-age children would be, at this development. And then if you could tell us what school those children, other than the high school children, we know would be at Brockton High, but what school that this project would feed into?
Sure, Councilor Thompson, thank you. In terms of, first question, in terms of the unit breakdown, and Jay, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have 4 studio units, 59 1-bedroom units, 99 2-bedroom units, and 13 3-bedroom units that will be spread out across the development, across the site in the 5 buildings. So that's the breakdown from of the unit type. With respect to to school age children, I think one of the things that I mentioned as well is that we would have a 70% local preference for Brockton residents. So I think that would help mitigate any impact of on the school system itself, given that up to 70% of the units could be occupied and by existing residents who may already be in the school system. In addition, in terms of the typical impact, and our other types of developments, it is relatively minimal. I don't have the specific numbers offhand, but that's something I can pull together and provide to you, Counselor. And in terms of where the students, what school district the students would go to, I don't know the answer to that offhand, but that's something I can look into at Council and get back to you on that.
Well, I appreciate that, Bill, and I'll stand by for that information. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, there's a question in the chat room. Did the traffic analysis include the volumes of traffic on the side streets?
It did, yes. There were several side streets that were included in the traffic study and so we did count a lot the side streets, the specific side streets, as well as any volume entering and exiting was included in our Thatcher Street traffic volumes.
Can you enumerate for me which ones they were, Jeff?
Yes, so both of the access points into Massasoit were included, and then we did include Kame Street and is it La Foy Street? That's opposite. Kame was in that as well. And then the peer reviewer had asked that we look at impacts. And it might have been mentioned by one of the other commenters. Was it Oakland Street, or is there's another street that's parallel as well that we were asked to look at impacts on?
Oakland is perpendicular. It runs off Thatcher Street.
Yeah.
I've had several comments on Oakland. Now without your project, it's, I guess, similar to.
That might have been the reason why it was brought up as a part of some of the comments on the peer review, just because of that sensitivity.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have questions or comments? Oh. Anyone? Okay. Councillor Dubois, at this time, would you like to speak?
I want to thank everybody for being here and telling the citizens that were able to attend more about this. And thank you, Councilor Castro, for hosting this, and Councilor Thompson for being here as well. I haven't looked through the little list to see who else is on the call. I had a different Zoom about the current COVID crisis and the financial implications of that for all of us in Brockton with Coalition for Social Justice. This isn't what I would like it to be. I have no problem with affordable housing or workforce housing. I never have. I know that people work hard and they don't get paid a lot of money, and they need a dignified place to live. I wish it was much smaller. Ideally, I would have liked it to be single family homes, but I wasn't on the city council in 2016 when this was allowed. And I know people don't like to hear that, and they think that it's pushing things off, but we've got a lot of a mess to deal with from that time, including the prospects of human incineration 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, brought to us by the kind Catholic Church, which I am a Catholic Church member, but I just do not like that. So I know that's a little bit off topic. But beyond that, I am here for the residents. Please feel free to reach out to me, 774-274-1344. And I'm not sure if we brought this up. Has the developer decided on if there's going to be a playground as part of this proposal? I know that Councilor Nicastro had been really working hard for that. Has that been determined?
Representative Dubois, Bill Grogan. I think what we stated is we recognize the importance of having one. If that's certainly a priority within the neighborhood and the community, and we're willing to work with Councilor Nicastro, Councilor Thompson, and others to see where the best place to situate that might be. Whether there's whether there's location in other areas that might be appropriate. But happy to have further conversations around that.
All right. Well, I do appreciate your openness and your willingness to have so many presentations on this. And I understand that in your heart, you really believe that you are doing what's right. And I am not surprised that nuns or the Catholic Church would want affordable, dignified housing for working people. That is part of our religion, and I can understand that 100%. That said, I know that the traffic is going to be an issue. I do have concerns with where Thatcher hits that V right there, but I think that's going to be something that the city is going to have to deal with in the years to come. It is a problem. I do appreciate your time and all the good that you do. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you, Representative Dubois. Gentlemen, speak with us briefly about security and lighting.
So maybe with respect to lighting, Brian, could I ask you to walk through the lighting plan and how that will be handled?
Sure, Bill. The plan that's presented here doesn't actually show the lighting, but we are proposing street lighting, as I mentioned earlier, along the three main roadways through the development, as well as parking lot lighting to provide safety and safe pedestrian access during the evening hours, both within the parking lots and along the sidewalks and roadways throughout the development. There would also be some level of lighting to be provided on the exterior of the buildings, yet to be determined, and that would be supplemented with the proposed site lighting.
Great, thanks, Brian. And with respect to security, all of the buildings will have access control systems with fobs limiting access to residents. We'll be have cameras in strategic locations on buildings throughout the site. But as I mentioned, we will have the convent. Will have significant community space, so we'd be working to make sure that that residents and neighbors for community meetings and outreach efforts like that are able to occur in a secure setting. But again, all of our developments, we have a security consultant who works with us in terms of the most appropriate system for the residential developments, as well as integrated camera systems, so that we can monitor the site and make sure we keep a tight, secure neighborhood within the for residents within the community.
Bill, I should also add that the peer review consultant did review the lighting plan as well, and there were a couple of comments which we have addressed and will be submitting a revised photometric plan. The main comment was pertaining to the level of lighting at the property line, and the intent is not to be lighting this up that it becomes intrusive to the abutting neighbors. It's mainly, or the main focus is really the interior safety of the residents.
Great, thank you. I will note, I thought the peer reviewer mentioned a playground. Yeah, so that's still on my wish list. We'll talk.
Sure. Yeah, and I think Councilman Castro, as I mentioned, happy to have conversation. I know some people have mentioned, is there a more appropriate place to have a playground in other areas in the neighborhood? But yes, happy to have conversations about where we think is the most appropriate place to have that.
Thank you. There is a question in the chat regarding, did you consider having an air quality study?
I know that our, we have an environmental engineer who has conducted our environmental analysis for us. I can check with them to see what, if any, types of air quality studies they've performed in connection with this. I know that we've looked at this in the context of some other questions or comments that have come up, and there's nothing that's caused us any concern or issues from having residential development in this location.
This is Elaine Donovan. That was my question, and pertinent to that, right here in this area in close proximity, we already have junkyards, auto dealers, landfills. There's this plan for the crematorium, but aside from that, now we're talking about having more traffic and adding boatloads of buses coming and going all the time. That to me seems like it would we already have terrible air quality over here, and it seems like that would just, really push it off the cliff and being just really terrible. I don't know about any other residents, but we often get just, a terrible odor intermittently where I live, depending on which way the wind blows. And so I don't think that should be overlooked, especially now that we know there's a plan to have a very active bus route coming and going. Thank you.
Appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Okay. So at this time, I'm going to wrap it up. And I want to thank Attorney Bill Grogan of the Planning Office for Urban Affairs, his team, Brian Kuchar, Jay Seisminsky, Attorney Dan Rabinovitz, Jeff Dirk. I wanted to thank my co-host, Ward 5 Councilor Jeff Thompson, as well as State Rep Michelle Dubois and Councilor at Large Winthrop Farwell. Because of the bad taste left in many people's mouths at the beginning of this process back in 2016, Councilor Thompson and I conferred, and great efforts were made to let neighbors know about this meeting this evening. To that end, 220 flyers were mailed to homes. In addition, I sent emails to the school committee chair, school committee representatives for wards 4 and 5, and the 4 counselors at large, one of whom did attend. I also posted this on Facebook and did get comments about it, so people knew about it. We tried very hard to get the word out because I want people to know the Planning Office for Urban Affairs has worked very hard to satisfy the peer reviewer, the wish lists of Councilor Thompson, Rep Dubois, and I, and others as well. And so I want to thank everyone this evening for their efforts to make this neighborhood meeting a success. And unless anyone has anything else to say in closing, I will say good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Great job, Susan.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.